Every hunter knows that every time you go into the woods, there's multiple dangers that you need to be aware of, whether it's wildlife, weather, terrain. However, every once in a while, the most dangerous thing that a hunter could come across in the woods is another person. And today I'm going to share with you a story that depicts exactly that. But before we get into today's encounter, if you've had an encounter or know a story that you would like to have shared on the show, please email me at the link below. If you like today's story, please gently slap that like button. And the next time you're heading out to deer camp, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. Now, let's get into today's encounter. For September long weekend up here in Canada back in 2008, me, my cousin Dave, and our buddy Eric from our military unit decided to head out to a farm that I've grown up hunting, that my cousin's grown up hunting, to go do some archery whitetail hunting for the very start of the season. Season had just opened, it was opening weekend. Me and my cousin Dave, we were both combat engineers with 31 Engineer Squadron, part of 38 Combat Engineer Regiment, and we were tasked with an armored recon unit called the Fort Garry Horse. And our buddy Eric was actually one of those armored recon soldiers. So when me and my cousin Dave were talking about potentially doing this trip at the armories one night, Eric overheard us, came up, started talking, and asked if he could come along. Me and my cousin were like, yeah, that's not a problem at all. Yeah, this will be a blast. So we ended up having to secure a bow for him because he did not have a bow. He had actually never been hunting before. He did have his hunter safety, but he had never gone out. So we hooked him up with a bow that we had borrowed from another one of our cousins. And on the Thursday night, we loaded everything up into my cousin Dave's truck and we made our way out to the farm. Now, the farm that I've grown up hunting is absolutely massive. It's located up in western Manitoba, just north of a town called Elkhorn. It's about 25 minutes north in an old town site called Willen, Manitoba. This property is huge. It's about 6.5 sections of land. It runs right up along the Assiniboine Valley. And it's absolutely phenomenal hunting up here. My uncle at that time, he had a trailer set up on this little 10-acre plot of trees that's just completely surrounded by cornfields and sunflower fields. Now, we could have very easily stayed in this trailer. However, given past experiences heading out that early in the year before anybody else had, that trailer was usually pretty disgusting. There's always just loaded with flies, loaded with mouse crap. So we planned on, instead of camping in the trailer, we brought a tent, and that's what we were going to be camping out in. So when we got out there, we took the quad off the back of the truck, got all of our stuff out, we set up a tent. We ended up finding right up along the bush line, there was this old car, so we used the trunk of the car kind of as our main cooking surface. So we put our barbecue up on that, and then we basically spent that day just kind of basically being a bunch of rednecks. We had brought out pretty much an ungodly amount of stuff with us. We had brought a whole bunch of rifles, bunch of shotguns, and my buddy Eric was really excited about this new SKS that he had bought. And when he had picked it up, he actually bought 2,000 rounds of Russian surplus ammo. That stuff is absolutely nasty, very corrosive. You need to clean whatever you shoot those rounds with. You need to clean that because it's gonna rust it out pretty quick. So that afternoon, we basically just blew through a ton of ammo, had an absolute blast. Once the evening came around, we went out into the cornfield, grabbed some corn. The farmer told us we could take as much of it as we wanted. So we grabbed some corn, fired up the barbecue. We had steak, corn on the cob, had a whole bunch of beer. That night, we climbed into the tent. Next morning, we woke up and we had to reload the quad back into my cousin's truck. We had to take it off the day before because a couple of the places we were going to go check out, to get there, it was incredibly rough and it was really hard on his truck. And his truck was only 2 weeks old at the time. He had just bought it. So we load the quad back up into the truck, hop in, and then we had to make our way down the drive where the camp is to this, basically it's a tractor trail that goes from the camp up to this main gravel road. So we make our way down this tractor trail, get to the gravel road, make a right turn. We drive about a mile down this road and it just completely ends right by a cemetery. And then from there, it's basically driving through a field on one of those very similar tractor trails to a corral. Now, where this corral is, it's very difficult some years to get past this in a vehicle. If there's been a lot of rain or if it was a really heavy snowfall winter, that area, even come, August, September, October, can be incredibly mucky and you cannot get a vehicle through there. It did not look that bad when we got up to it, so we made our way through the first part of the corral. We closed the fence, and then we had to go across a spot that we refer to as Bastogne. It literally looks like a whole bunch of little artillery shells have hit all along the bush line and along the ground. There's these like real deep holes. Some of them are about a foot and a half, 2 feet deep. So you have to really pick where you drive a vehicle through here or you'll get stuck. So we made our way through that real rough patch, got up to the second gate, and then my cousin's truck ended up basically getting buried right to the axles. So we had to unload the quad, figured, you know what, we'll deal with this after. I ended up taking my buddy Eric. I drove him about 2 miles further down this fence line, dropped him off down by the valley, came back, got my cousin, went back. We hunted that morning. That afternoon, we made our way back to the truck. We took the quad, me and my cousin Dave. We left Eric with the truck, and we headed up to where the farmer lived, which was from where we were is about 2.5 miles. So we went to the farmer's house, talked with his brother, and his brother came with his big tractor and ended up pulling Dave's truck out of this mud. A few hours later, we got back to camp after getting the truck unstuck, and my cousin Dave, he really wanted to go check out this far side of this alfalfa field that's on this opposing part of bush. So where the camp is set up, there's a big field that kind of comes into a bay like this, and then it runs out, and then it basically loops around like this into another field. And on the far side of that one, there's another real dense bush line. So my cousin wanted to go check out this spot on the far side of this alfalfa. So he hopped on the quad, took off along the side of the cornfield, made his way along that bush line. And me and Eric at this point were kind of getting a little bit bored. So we decided, you know what, let's bust out this SKS again and let's pop some more rounds off. So me and Eric set up some pop bottles, some beer cans, and then we basically just spent some time sending some rounds down range. At one point, Eric was reloading the mags for the SKS, and I happened to turn and look down the drive towards that tractor trail, and there was this silver Ram 1500 sitting about 75 yards away, facing us on that driveway. I instantly found that weird because I know the vehicles that the farmer has, I know what his brother drives, and this was definitely neither of their trucks. This truck started making its way towards us, got to about 25 yards, it stopped, and we could tell that there were two people up in the front, and we could see that there was somebody else in the back seat, but we couldn't tell if the person in the back was male or female. But we could tell that the two people up in the front were definitely male. At this point, the guy rolled his window down, stuck his head out, and was like, "Oh, I thought you guys were in the army or something." Now, what me, my cousin, and my buddy were wearing for camo on this trip was actually our issued CAD pad uniforms, which is something you're not really supposed to do. But we had sterilized them down. We removed our name tags, removed our flags, removed our slip-ons. But we were wearing full CAD pad, combat boots, along with our bush caps. So we basically said, no, we're just hunting, we're just camping out. Like, how could we help you? These two guys instantly get out of the truck, start walking towards us, and when they got out, we started moving towards them as well. And at that point, we could tell that the person on the back seat was actually a woman, and she looked very uneasy. Like, she looked like she was actually freaking out. And at this point, I didn't know, like, if she's freaking out because they just pulled up on these two guys basically wearing army uniforms. One guy's got a rifle slung over his shoulder. The other guy's holding an SKS, which a lot of people who are not familiar with guns would probably just assume is an AK-47. At this point, the guy that was driving looked at me and asked if we were the landowners. I told him no, and then he asked if I knew who the landowner was. So to me, at that point, that was telling me, like, hey, this guy does not know who owns the land. That means he's not supposed to be here. So being a little more confrontational in my younger days, I kind of got in his face and told him exactly that. I said, you know what? If you don't know who owns the land, then you're not supposed to be here. So get the F off this property. At this point, he told me that they wanted to drill for oil behind the old homestead. He said that they worked for an oil company out of Alberta. Now, what he meant by the old homestead is right behind where my uncle's trailer was set up. There was this old stone house that was kind of all collapsed in on itself that we used to jokingly call the Blair Witch Hut. Now, because he did not know the owner, I was not going to let him go wandering through the bush. So I again told him, like, hey, you got to get out of here. You have to go talk to the landowner. Then he started asking me where the landowner lived. And I was not going to give him that information just because something did not feel right about these guys. Their vehicle, he said that they were from Alberta. It did not have Alberta plates. There were no markings on the windows, no company name on the side of the truck. So I basically just told him, get the F out of here, go get a map. Come back with the landowner, and then, okay. So the one guy reluctantly made his way back up to the passenger side of the truck. But then the driver started moving towards where my uncle's trailer was. And then in behind this old kind of, it's sort of like a barn, but it's not quite a barn. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's almost like this old workshop type building, making his way in behind that. Now, the problem with that was right behind that, that's where we kind of had a whole bunch of our other rifles in their cases, just so they were out of the way. So instantly, as he started making his way in behind this building, my buddy Eric instantly started following him just to make sure this guy would not take any of the rifles that were there, or basically just wanted to keep an eye on him. After about a minute, they came back out of the bush, and right at this period of time, my cousin Dave just comes flying up on the quad. Now, Dave's dressed the exact same way as me and Eric, except he has a 12-gauge shotgun over his shoulder. And I guess Dave could just read on my face and on Eric's face and just our demeanor that something was off about these guys. So he came flying up on the quad. He stopped like 2 feet away from this guy, got off, and got right up into this guy's face. It was just like, who are you? And the guy told him, oh, I work for an oil company. Dave kind of leans back, looks at the side of the truck, and he's like BS, like, who are you? So I told Dave like what was going on. And I told him, like, I've already told them to get out of here. So then Dave too, he was like, yeah, you better get the F out of here, right? Got in the guy's face a little bit more. After a few seconds, the guy got back into his truck. He backed up down that drive up to that tractor trail, and then they drove away. After that, we didn't really think anything more of it. We did think it was a little bit weird because that woman just seemed very on edge, like very off, almost like something was maybe not right with her and those guys. And we were trying to figure out too, like, why these guys were so obsessed with trying to get into the bush there. We were kind of convinced that they had like some type of grow up going in there. So we actually looked around in the bush for a while trying to see if there were any sign of that. We didn't come across nothing. That evening, again, we had a barbecue, went into the tent, called it a night. Sometime in the middle of the night, I can't remember if it was 1 or if it was 2 in the morning, we could hear a vehicle coming down that tractor trail, and we could hear it turn and start coming down the drive towards us. We heard that vehicle stop exactly where that truck had stopped before, right by my uncle's old trailer. And then we heard the motor shut off. We heard one door open, heard another door open. We could hear some people get out. Then we heard the 2 doors close. There was definitely 2 doors that closed. So we knew at this point there was at least 2 people outside of this vehicle. And then we heard that tall tale signature sound of a shotgun being racked. Now, all 3 of us had a weird feeling about these dudes earlier on in the day. So when we called it a night in the tent, We brought a bunch of our weapons into the tent with us. So as soon as we heard that sound of a shotgun racking, all three of us instantly grabbed onto a weapon. I grabbed onto my Remington 730-06. My cousin grabbed onto a shotgun. And our buddy Eric was lying there and he pulled the pin out of the mag for his SKS, because up here in Canada, magazines have to be pinned for 5 rounds. So he pulled the pin out and we could hear him very quietly adding more ammo into this magazine. And then he too puts the mag into the SKS, very quietly cocks the action, and we could hear somebody outside the tent back towards where this vehicle had stopped, moving into the bushes where those guys had gone in before. So at this point, all three of us, we kind of turned. We're inside the tent, we have our weapons ready, we're staying low, and we said, like, hey, if we hear a shot, we're bailing out of the tent, just start shooting in that direction and get behind cover. So the three of us basically spent about 10 minutes prepping for a potential firefight with these guys. After about 10 minutes though, we heard them make their way back to the truck. We heard them get in, start the truck up, and then we heard them backing towards that tractor trail. Once they were at the tractor trail, we got out of the tent, kind of fanned out. I made my way along that cornfield, right along the edge of the cornfield. I had my rifle up and I was looking down the drive up towards that trail, and I could tell that that was definitely the same truck that we'd encountered earlier in the day. So from that point on, for the remainder of the trip, basically what we did is we had a sentry. So one guy would be outside the tent, pretty much lying on the ground in this big pile of grass. We actually made like a almost like a little bunker out of grass and hay, and we'd have somebody lying in there where they had a full field of view down that drive while the other two guys would sleep. We did 1-hour shifts each, and only one more time on the other 2 nights we were out there, that truck came back, but they did not come all the way down that drive again. They kind of stopped up by that tractor trail and then carried on down the rest of the way. We ended up talking to the landowner after to ask him if he knew anything about these guys, and he had no idea whatsoever. Neither did his brother, who lives in the area as well, and neither did his sister. So what these guys were doing, we'll never know. We did actually the next morning after they came back, because we were concerned about that woman, we spent about 3.5 hours combing through that entire chunk of bush just in case those guys did something to her and dumped her in the trees. But there was nobody there. They saw a very big chunk of bush anyway, but we looked through it for multiple hours, nothing at all. But that was myself probably one of the most uneasy experiences that I've ever had out hunting, just because it could have turned south incredibly quick. And I think that if it was not for the fact that all three of us were in the military, that, you know, maybe we would have reacted different. Maybe we would have called out to these guys. And if we did that, if they were up to no good, would we have been in trouble? But the fact that, you know, we kept our cool, stayed collected, and were ready in case stuff did pop off, I think that's kind of what got us through that, and why things did not escalate to the point of bad things potentially happening. Well, that's it for today's stories. So please leave a comment in the comments section. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you next time.